Hello folks, Pastor Tracy Gruggett here, back after a little hiatus. So just getting back in the swing of things, and going to resume doing some videos during the week, and starting with today. I thought that we need to continue to have a strong emphasis upon the sovereignty of God in our lives. During this COVID crisis, during all the political decisions that are being made that are affecting the churches, we still need to have the sovereignty of God put before us. And there are two ways, two broad ways that are afoot, ways of reacting to this COVID crisis. One is to maximalize it, virtually the end of the world kind of thing, and then the other is to minimize it. It is not that big of a deal. The sovereignty of God is, one, will make you frantic. The former, end of the world, or close to it, or something akin to Black Death or World War I in terms of its devastation, especially in the European nations. This kind of extremism is it's not helpful, and it will strike fear in your heart. And then there's the minimizing. It's not that big of a deal. And the problem potentially with that view is you're not really trusting in God. Instead, something else, something that's told you that this is no big deal. Time will tell on how big of a deal it is. Either way, we need to be trusting in the sovereignty of God. God is absolutely sovereign. He is meticulously and comprehensively sovereign. Sovereign means he is the king who is in control of all the creation that he has made, that he's created. He brought it into being out of nothing. It exists by his daily exertion, if I can put it this way, of power and wisdom and control. He is sustaining it, upholding it, and he's doing so with purpose, fulfilling his plans and decrees which he made before the world began. Everything that is happening today, this very moment, is by the sovereign providence of God. Sovereignty, that is, or I should say omnipotence, is what stands behind sovereignty, and really those blend together as conceptually. And then sovereignty and omnipotence, his divine omnipotence, his almighty power, is behind the doctrine of providence. So I want to start today by thinking about providence. We can do, in terms of man-made documents, I was going to say we could do no better than go to the catechism. Well, we can do the scriptures, but in terms of man-made documents, we can do no better than go to the Heidelberg Catechism, 26 through 28. Now, 26 doesn't deal with providence per se, but it's talking about addressing God as our Father. But you will see the doctrine of providence writ large on number 26. So I will read them. What do you believe when you say, I believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth? That, the eternal Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. Right, here comes creation by the Father, who out of nothing made heaven and earth and all that is in them, and likewise upholds and governs them by his eternal counsel and providence, is for the sake of Christ, right? His Son, my God and my Father, in whom I so trust as to have no doubt that he will provide for me all things necessary for body and soul, and further, that that whatever evil he sends in this valley of tears, he will turn to my good, for he is able to do it, being almighty God, and willing also, being a faithful Father. Providence, whatever evil he sends to me in this vale of tears, right? And then it goes on to speak about this word providence. What do you understand by the providence of God? The almighty, everywhere present power of God, whereby, as it were, he still upholds heaven and earth with all creatures, and so governs them. So you see upholding and governing, upholding, preservation, and governance. So governs them. that herbs, grass, rain, drought, fruitful, barren years, meat and drink. Notice the contrast. Health and sickness, riches and poverty. See the contrast there. All things come not by chance. Whatever condition you are in, and notice this, we can just sort of run and gloss right over these contrasts here. These are referring to conditions of human life that can fluctuate, right? And now some people, they are born into a situation of poverty, others into wealth, and will remain so all their lives. Others switch. Many people are born into conditions of just call it the middle class, and who stay and work hard and all this and remain in that. But within that situation, their lives fluctuate. Sometimes they might go through a season where they're month to month in it. Other times a little more prosperity. But whatever the case, and sometimes things get really tight. Okay. Our catechism says these states of being, these conditions of our lives, come not by chance, but by his fatherly hand. Not just by his hand, not just in the sovereignty of God. And you see that familial flavor here to the catechism, reflecting the scriptures. Familial, family. Flavor here. Not just raw sovereignty, raw power governing all things. But the hand of God is a fatherly hand. Fatherly. What does it profit us to know that God created and by his providence upholds all things? That we may be patient in adversity, thankful in prosperity, and for the future have good confidence in our faithful God and Father, that no creature can separate us from his love. And since all creatures are so in his hand, that without his will they cannot so much as move. That last statement, that all creatures are so much in his hands that they cannot so much as move, right? That's actually reflected a lot in Calvin's Institutes. You'll see that kind of thought. And the Catechism seems to have really captured that thought here. And that's not surprising, given the writers were very cognizant and aware of Calvin's theology. But that's a side note, sidebar there. Listen. Whatever is happening, even those things that might be against us, they don't happen apart from the will of God. Apart from his will, they cannot so much as move. And what that means then, thankful in prosperity, patient in adversity. Did you hear that one? Patient in adversity. What is future? Good confidence. Now let's get some Bible in here. So we're talking about providence still. And now I'm going to go to a fundamental, foundational text for understanding the providence of God. That's Genesis 8, really 8 and 9. Here we see the Noahic covenant, sometimes referred to as the covenant of preservation. It comes after the flood and the destruction, and God brought judgments on the earth. And we need to understand that the big context for this is that mankind at that time and afterwards and even now is ripe for judgment. That the thing that happened to them in a certain sense, while unique, the flood, all right, in terms of it's being something God, the world deserved, that's not unique. In other words, their condition is not unique to them, and that which provoked God, which was that the sins of their mind and heart were evil continually all the time. Right? I think that's Genesis 6:5. Continually evil all the time. So we are in. So when we think of preservation, God upholding all things, okay, it's just not this raw metaphysical kind of thing. Now, metaphysical is a concept. It's a philosophy, the philosophy of being. And it isn't just, he's upholding it so that it exists. But when looking at things redemptive historically, he's upholding it so that he will not, if I could put it this way, he's preserving it in the way he is even though it deserves it, the whole kit and caboodle because of man, deserves to be annihilated and abolished away from the holy presence of God. It is a corrupt creation because of man. Right? It's against that background that we have these promises now. So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife, God calls them to go out of the ark. Sons, wives with him, every beast, every creeping thing, every bird, everything that moves on the earth went out by families from the ark. All right. So we see here, God intends to preserve. Right? He's preserved mankind. He's preserved the animals. He intends to preserve. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. This would be Genesis 8:20, and took some of every clean animal and some of every clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma. The Lord said in his heart, I will never again curse the ground because of man, for the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Still. Well, it doesn't say still, I added that. Neither will I ever again strike down every living creature as I have done. While the earth remains in seed times and harvest, cold, heat, and summer, all right, day and night, they shall not cease. Yes, that has implications for environmentalism. Environmentalism is a philosophy of life, a worldview that of itself is corrupt. But the preservation of the environment and seeking to be good stewards and managers of it is absolutely a biblical concept. But that's a side note again. Here God is going to preserve, and here he says, I'm not going to judge the world like I did. I'm going to preserve it. Even though mankind's heart is still evil from his youth, we're in the same position. All right? The world is being preserved by virtue of a covenant that God made. Covenant with Noah, in which he said he's going to preserve it. And he has, he is, he will. We are being preserved by the Lord, though we do not deserve it. Why? Grace. Grace. And so we see him blessing the earth. He sends the animals and humanity out into it to fulfill what man was intended to do. It's not the same thing as going back into the garden. It's a kind of new start, yes, but it's a new start in a post-fall world. That's where we live. And it's still filled with a lot of sin. All right? Now, preservation then. God is not going to flood the world again to destroy humanity. Okay? A giant war is not going to destroy humanity. Granted, in Genesis 9, he says, I will not bring floods. The whole idea is that he's not going to judge it until Christ comes. The final day. The day. Okay? And no pandemic is going to destroy humanity either. But they can be very, very serious. We trust in the sovereignty of God at all times. We are not promised here that rather, we are promised that the world will be preserved for his purposes, right? And but we are promised that no cataclysmic judgment, no catastrophism of a kind of apocalyptic scenario is going to happen, except that, say, the book of Revelation, where we get the word apocalypse, the apocalypse of Jesus Christ. Okay, that's very different than the common scenarios that we see in our world. This keeps us from despairing, but it also helps us to take things very seriously too. Pestilences and the like and wars can bring great devastation. And so let us be wise. Let us be trusting in God who will fulfill his purposes. But God is with us. He is preserving us. And he will preserve his church for his purposes to fulfill that which he has purposed, which is to draw in all his to save all of his elect people through the gospel of Jesus Christ. That purpose will be accomplished. Well, I got in 15 minutes on this one. So just a few thoughts there. The Catechism of the Scriptures to remind us and refresh us in the providence of God. Folks, have a good week. Lord willing, we'll see you here in the near future. Adios.